In this world, we are taught to admire the ones who rise the highest. The ones who wear crowns, who build empires, who command armies with a flick of their fingers. And I understand that. I've played those roles in films: the ruler, the conqueror, the man who walks into battle with a sword and a stare. It looks glorious on the big screen. But real life, real change, it's quieter, it's softer. And far more powerful. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wasn't sent to rule over lands. He was sent to rule over hearts. And not by force, but by compassion. He didn't come with treasures or kingdoms. He came with something far more valuable: healing. Yes, healing. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't need a throne. The kind that reaches into the soul of a broken man, or a silenced woman, or a frightened child, and says, you matter. You are seen. You are loved. When he walked through the streets of Makkah, he wasn't followed by gold-laden caravans. He was followed by people whose lives he had touched with nothing more than a word, a gesture, a moment of mercy. Because that's who he was. A healer of wounds the world didn't even want to acknowledge. At a time when cruelty was common and mercy was mistaken for weakness, he came with a message that was revolutionary in its simplicity: be kind, be just, be human. He didn't look at people and see titles or souls. He saw pain. And he responded with patience and love, not punishment. There's a story that stays with me. A woman used to throw garbage on him every single day. Just imagine that. The leader of a people, a man of integrity, being humiliated like that, day after day. But he never retaliated. Not once. And one day, when she didn't appear, he didn't feel relief. He felt concern. He went to her home to see if she was okay. Now tell me, is that the action of a ruler? Or is that the heart of a healer? He didn't heal with potions or spells. He healed with presence, with empathy. He didn't try to dominate people, he tried to understand them. When a young man once asked him for permission to commit a sin, he didn't scold him. He didn't shame him. He gently walked him through it. He spoke to the young man's heart, not his ego. And the man left changed not by fear but by love. That is leadership. That is prophecy. That is healing. He walked with orphans. He sat with the poor. He wiped the tears of those the world had forgotten. He gave people their dignity back. And I think that's the most extraordinary kind of power there is. The power not to break others but to build them. Even his enemies couldn't deny the truth of his character. Even those who fought him, when they looked into his eyes, saw no hatred. Only sadness that they hadn't yet seen the light he was trying to give them. And here's the real magic: he didn't just heal individuals. He healed a society. A society that once buried its daughters now honored them. A society torn apart by tribalism and vengeance now stood shoulder to shoulder in prayer, equal before God. A society that once worshipped idols of stone now followed the message of one Creator, with hearts softened and eyes opened. You see, we often think of greatness in terms of how many people bow before you. But true greatness is how many people you lift up with you. How many you forgive when you could punish. How many you comfort when you could walk away. That was the prophet. Not a king of thrones, but a king of hearts. Not a man who conquered cities, but a man who conquered pain and replaced it with peace. So yes, he could have ruled. With the charisma he had, with the wisdom, the strength, he could have sat on any throne. But he chose something higher. He chose to heal. And in that choice, he didn't just become a man of God. He became a mercy to the world. We live in a world where power is worshipped. The louder someone speaks, the more we listen. The richer someone becomes, the more we believe they matter. We celebrate dominance in boardrooms, on stages, in politics, even in friendships. Power, influence, control, these are the currencies of our time. But there was a man who flipped the script. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, showed us that real strength isn't how much you can take. It's how much you can give when you don't have to. That the truest measure of a person isn't in how high they rise, but in how humbly they walk when they're already at the top. You see, power can buy silence, but character earns respect. Power can intimidate, but character inspires. And the Prophet inspired, without palaces, without crowns, without the need to prove himself through force. His character spoke before his words ever did. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy, long before he ever declared prophethood. Why? Not because of miracles or magic, but because when he said something, you could trust it. When he promised something, you didn't need a signature. His word was enough. Imagining that in today's world, where even contracts come with fine print, where honesty is rare, but here was a man 1,400 years ago who showed that integrity isn't a strategy, it's a lifestyle. There's something extraordinary about how he handled power. When it came to him, he never clung to it. When people offered him the world gold, women, leadership to stop his message, he didn't pause. He said, even if they placed the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I would not abandon this mission. That's not stubbornness. That's conviction. That's character. He taught that leadership isn't about being above people, but among them. When food was scarce, he was the hungriest. When danger came, he stood at the front. When people made mistakes, he corrected them gently, not to humiliate, but to help them grow. One of the most powerful examples of his character is how he treated his enemies. Imagine you're tortured, mocked, thrown out of your home. You struggle for years. And finally you return victorious. The city that once rejected you now stands before you defeated. If it were any of us, revenge would be tempting. We'd want justice. We'd want to see fear in their eyes. But him? He stood before them, all those who had wronged him, and said, I say to you what Yusuf said to his brothers. No blame will be upon you today. Go. You are free. That moment, that choice, that mercy shook the world. That wasn't weakness. That was the greatest show of strength. Because anyone can punish, but only the strongest heart can forgive. And you know, in life, there are people who are admired for their brilliance, their beauty, their talent, but the ones who are loved, the ones whose names are whispered in prayer. Centuries later are the ones who lived with character. The ones who chose humility over ego, patience over pride, truth over comfort. That's who he was. He didn't lie, even when a lie could have saved him. He didn't retaliate, even vengeance was within reach. He didn't change his values when the world didn't understand them. And that, my friends, is the essence of character. Doing what's right, not because it's easy, but because it's true. We think power means controlling others. But he taught that real power is controlling yourself, your anger, your arrogance, your impulses. And in every test, whether it was pain, loss, betrayal, or victory, he passed with dignity. Sometimes I wonder what would the world look like if we followed that example more. If we raised our children to value character before career. If we judged leaders not by their speeches, but by their service. If we stopped chasing followers and started becoming people worth following. Because power fades, fame disappears. But character lives on. He didn't just change lives in his lifetime. He continues to change hearts centuries later. Not through force, not through wealth, but through the quiet, unstoppable force of who he was. That is why, even without a throne, he became the most influential man in history. Not because he ruled the world, but because he mastered himself. And in doing so, he taught us that the greatest victory is not over others, it's over your own ego. That's not just character, that's legacy. There's a kind of silence in this world that is louder than any noise. It is the silence of those who have been ignored, forgotten, pushed aside. The silence of the weak, the poor, the oppressed. The silence of those whose voices have been stolen by fear, by injustice, by cruelty. But then there are rare souls who hear that silence, who don't just hear it but feel it deep in their bones. And they become the voice for those who cannot speak. The shield for those who cannot defend themselves. The light for those lost in darkness. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was that rare soul. Imagine a world where slavery was accepted, where the orphan was left to starve, where women had no rights, no respect, no say, where your tribe was everything, and if you were born outside the powerful tribes, you were nothing, where might made right, and the weak had no hope. This was the world into which he was born. And what did he do? Did he turn away? Did he say, this is how things are, I can't change it? No, he said, enough. He became the voice for the orphan, for the widow, for the servant, for the woman who was told she was less than a man, for the slave who was treated like property. He didn't just speak for them in private. He stood before crowds, in markets, in courts, and said loud and clear, you matter. Your dignity is sacred. Your rights are not negotiable. He didn't ask for their voices to be heard tomorrow, next year, or someday in the future. He demanded change here, now, today. He gave the orphan his place at the table. He made the widow's tears worth wiping. He raised the status of women when the world thought them invisible. He gave slaves freedom and respect. He brought the lowest in society to stand as equals. This was not just social reform. It was revolutionary. And the way he did it was so beautiful because it was filled with love and respect, not anger or hatred. When people asked, "Why do you care so much about the weak?" he would say, "Because God's mercy is with those who show mercy to the weak." He gave the best spot in prayer to a former slave named Bilal, a man who was once chained and beaten not because of politics or popularity, but because of his faith and character. Imagine the courage and the statement in that act. It told the world status does not come from birth or wealth, but from the soul. He stood beside women when others cast them aside. His wife Khadija was not only his partner, but his strongest supporter and the first to believe in his mission. And the way he treated her with love, respect and kindness was unheard of at the time. He taught that men and women are equal in the eyes of God. That honor is earned by character, not gender. And what about the poor, the hungry, the sick? He didn't pass by them or look away. He sat with them, fed them, cared for them. In his presence, the poor felt dignity. The forgotten felt remembered. The broken felt whole. This is what true leadership looks like, not the kind with armies or politics, but the kind that lifts the most vulnerable, the kind that listens when no one else will, the kind that speaks when others are silent. In my films, I often play characters who fight injustice, but those are stories scripted for the screen. What the Prophet did was real life and real change. He gave power to those who had none. He gave a voice to those who had been silenced for generations. And that voice was not just for a moment. It was a call to action, to justice, to equality, to mercy. He taught us that a society is judged not by how it treats its kings or the wealthy, but by how it treats its weakest members. And that no civilization can be truly great if it leaves behind the orphans, the widows, the slaves. This message is not just for his time. It is for every time. For every person who feels unheard, unseen, undervalued. So when you feel small in this big world, remember him. When you feel like no one listens, remember that he stood up for the voiceless. When the world feels harsh and cold, remember that his legacy is mercy, justice, and love for all, especially those who cannot speak for themselves. He wasn't just a prophet. He was the voice of the voiceless, the hope of the hopeless, the strength of the weak. And that is why millions still send peace and blessings upon him every day, because the world remembers what it means to be truly heard, truly loved, truly seen. When we talk about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the first thing that comes to many minds is faith. The religion he brought, the teachings, the rules. But if you look deeper, beyond the rituals in history, you discover something even more powerful. His legacy was not just faith, it was love. Love, a word so simple, yet so profound. Love that doesn't demand. Love that doesn't condition. Love that doesn't expect anything in return. It's easy to say we love when everything is smooth. But true